Good evening, student. Today I am going to explain you some of the important questions which is come in your board exam, and many of you are actually facing some difficulties to answer this kinds of questions. So the first question is observation based question. The observation based question is that kind of question actually in which the students are failed to do the correct answer. So the first question is, what will be your observation when an iron turnings added in copper sulfate solution? Most of the student write this kinds of answer by writing the equation, but that is not the correct thing. Observation means what? Observation means what you are going to visualize, what you can see. You have to write particular that thing. So in case when we added some iron turnings in copper sulfate solution, the paper setter do not require that what are you write to chemical equations or something else. You have to write the observation. So what will be the observation? When we added copper turnings in copper sulfate solution, first you have to write the color of the copper sulfate solution, which is blue. And when we added the iron turnings in copper sulfate solution, immediately the solution turned into green. So the first observation is the blue color copper sulfate solution turned into green. Along with, we can also visualize that a reddish brown substance will be deposited. You have to write the second observation, that a reddish brown substance will be deposited. So these are the observation based answers. You have to answer this type of question by writing only the observation. They do not require any kind of chemical equation. If in your question they are asked you to identify the substance, only then you can write the chemical equation, or if they ask you to write down the balanced chemical equation, then you can write the chemical equation. Otherwise, no need to write down any chemical equation for these kinds of questions. Okay, so we can move on for the next question. The next question is from carbon and its compound chapter. How can you distinguish between saturated and unsaturated hydrocarbon? We all know about the saturated and unsaturated hydrocarbon. The saturated hydrocarbon means a substance with these 4 individual bonds, and an unsaturated hydrocarbon, they either have double bond or triple bond. These are the unsaturated hydrocarbons. So if we are going to distinguish between saturated and unsaturated hydrocarbon, we have to make a chemical equation. First, we take the bromine water. When a bromine water react with unsaturated hydrocarbon, they will produce this kind of compound, 1,2 dibromoethane, 1,2 dibromoethane. Now, in this category, what is going on? When you distinguish between the unsaturated and saturated hydrocarbon, when you added bromine water to the unsaturated hydrocarbon, the reddish color of the bromine will going to be faded. And in case of saturated hydrocarbon, no such characteristics observation will be found. So, how can you distinguish between these two? When we added bromine water to unsaturated hydrocarbon, the reddish color of the bromine will fade, and in case of saturated hydrocarbon, no such characteristics observation will be found. Done? Okay. Now let's move for the next question. Produce a non-polar substance from a polar substance by substitution reaction. You all know about the substitution reaction. The substitution reaction is like this way: when a methane is added with chlorine in presence of the sunlight. So one hydrogen will be substituted and HCl will be formed. The monochloroethane will be produced. Monochloromethane will going to be produced. Fine. Now in our question, the question was asked that a polar substance, a non-polar substance will going to be formed from a polar substance, right? Now what is a non-polar substance? A non-polar substance is a substance which have a dipole moment equals to 0. That means which will not going to produce any kinds of ion or do not show any kind of polarity, right? And we have to produce this thing from a polar substance. That means which will going to produce a ion or which can show the dipole moment. Fine. So let's see that thing. In the last step of substitution reaction of methane, we can see this reaction. Hydrogen, chlorine, 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 which is chloroform, right? When this react with chlorine in presence of sunlight, or some students can write H nu, isn't it? Then we can find out this compound. Carbon tetrachloride. Carbon tetrachloride is a non-polar substance. Why? Let's see a look. In carbon tetrachloride, the 4 chlorine drag the pair of electrons toward itself in equal forces. Therefore, the pair of electrons will not move either of the side, and no further ion is going to be produced. Therefore, these are behave as a non-polar substance, whereas chloroform or trichloromethane is a polar substance, because in trichloromethane, these 2 chlorine are pull the pair of electron in equal force. That's true. But in case of the hydrogen and opposite chlorine, the chlorine will pull the pair of electron in a greater force rather than hydrogen. Therefore, a partial del minus charge and a partial del plus charge will going to be produced. Fine. So, by this way we can produce a non-polar substance from a polar substance by the substitution reaction. Clear? Okay. Let's move for the next question. What is covalent compound? Write the classification on the covalent compound. Now this is very important and interesting topic. Many of the students actually fail to understand about the covalent compounds and the covalent bonding, and they do not understand why covalent compound are sharing the electrons. Just give me a moment to explain this. We are going to explain this thing by taking any of the element. For example, carbon. Carbon atomic number is equals to 6. So its configuration will be 2, 4. In this element, the carbon neither can accept electron nor can donate electrons. That means no C4 plus or C4 minus will be possible, isn't it? In this case, to fulfill its octet, carbon definitely going to sharing the electrons with any other element. For example, we just take a look for the methane. Okay, in this case, carbon have 4 electron. I'm just going to draw the electron dot structure. Carbon and 4 electrons in its valence shell, and it will take 4 hydrogen. Hydrogens have 1 electron. So each electron donated by the hydrogen. Now, carbon and hydrogen both have to fulfill their octet and duplet as well. So, in this case, at first, hydrogens are fulfilling their duplet like this manner, right? And carbon now going to fulfill its octet. So, in this case, both carbon and hydrogen are fulfilling their octet and duplet and get stability. Now this is an example of the covalent compound and the covalent bonding. The second question is, what are the classification? This is not only that one type of covalent compound. There are basically two types of covalent compound. One is a polar covalent compound, another is a non-polar covalent compound. Many of the elements, for example, oxygen, O2, Cl2, H2, these are the elements who are going to form the form the covalent compound of the non-polar. Whereas HCl, just let me clean the board. For example, HCl. In case of HCl, what's going to happen? Hydrogen is going to share the 1 electron and chlorine have 7 electron in its valence shell. Right? In this case, hydrogen fulfill their duplet, chlorine fulfill their octet. There is not an issue. But in this category, the shared pair of electron between the hydrogen and chlorine will be dragged towards the chlorine due to the higher electronegativity of the chlorine. In this case, there will be H del plus and Cl del minus will be found in these two different atoms. That means they gain their polarity in covalent compound, isn't it? So in this case, at first they have the non-polar covalent characteristics, and on other hand the HCl have the polar covalent characteristics. That means in particular covalent compound there are two different kinds of characteristics. One is non-polar, another is polar. Okay, so this was the very few of the questions in this short session. Hope you enjoyed and learned something in this very short session, and wish you all the best for your upcoming board exam. Best of luck, student.